Alrighty, welcome to Mock Draft Monday, the last Mock Draft Monday, as a matter of fact, before the 2021 NFL Draft. You got Smitty, you got Tyler. Today we are joined by Noah Strackbine of AllSteelers.com. He gets the biggest screen if you're watching on YouTube, Twitter, Facebook, whatever it might be. That's his handsome face right there, all big for you. So,
Thanks.
Noah, what's going on?
What's going on, guys? Thanks for having me on. Final one. I didn't know.
Yeah, I mean, we do have one more Monday where we could do it. We're leaving it open. We're still trying to do a first-round mock draft with a couple friends. That's a potential date for us. So we're just going to leave it open. This will be the last one we do. Just to, let me pull this up first because we're going to get this rolling. But, yeah, using Pro Football Network, of course, as we always have, 7 rounds. Noah, I mean, before we start doing this, you're pretty tapped in with the organization, at least more so than us. What is your gut telling you as of right now we see happen?
Oh, that's tough. So I think it all depends. I talked about this a little bit today. The Steelers, I think, are going to go into it like they go into it every year, and they have their positions because they're a team that always drafts best available, but best available of the positions that they need. I mean, Artie Burns, prime example of that. Terrell Edmonds, prime example of that. This year, I would say left tackle, center, and running back are their top 3 needs. So when it comes to it, I think it's the best player available on their board. That doesn't have to be the best player, on Mel Kiper's board because Najee Harris is going to be super high. If they believe that somebody else is higher than them, that's who they're going to go with. But I would stick with one of those 3 positions.
Yeah, I'm with you. And you know what? It's funny that you mentioned those 3 positions. I think a lot of people would be in agreement with those 3 positions. But Jason Lockenfora of CBS was on 93.7 The Fan, and he threw out one player from each of those 3 positions as the 3 players that the Steelers are dialed in on for pick 24. That would be Landon Dickerson, Najee Harris, and Tevin Jenkins, the tackle out of Oklahoma State. So, I mean, I don't know if specific players, if those 3 would be the ones that you would say that you feel like they're dialed in on. But I mean, the thing with me is if it's Tevin Jenkins, they're bucking a trend, right? Because they weren't at his pro day. Yep,
exactly. I don't really like that pick. The Athletic put that out as well. And I don't know. I just don't agree with it. I think that they've never shied away from their process, and their process starts and finishes with a pro day. And then it goes into a ton of scouting. That's why I think they left Javonte Williams alone because they know he's not going to be around, so why even bother? I think they feel kind of the same way about Tevin Jenkins. I don't get that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, we can kind of just jump right into this. We will say, I feel like we should probably do this one as realistic as possible. I don't know if you've seen some of the other ones. Some of them we've done as realistic as possible. There's other ones where we've traded up for like a Zach Wilson.
You're telling me that we're not going to get Justin Fields. I'm telling you, Justin Fields to the moon.
Let's see how it falls. But I should also preface this by saying we've yet to have a mock draft where we've grabbed Najee Harris, which is obviously a very real possibility for Pittsburgh.
Yeah, okay. we've only taken a running back once in the first round. It was Travis Etienne.
Yeah, he either hasn't been there or we've decided to go a different direction because like one time we had Micah Parsons fall all the way to 24.
Oh, okay.
So.
Okay. All right.
All right. So anyway, yeah.
Also,
Pittsburgh Steelers.
Ask,
rounds. Good.
What? So he said Landon Dickerson at 24. I mean, maybe the Steelers make that pick, but to me, isn't that kind of high for him?
Very high. I don't think that's. I mean, the Steel. That's what I mean. If Najee and Travis Etienne are gone at that point, I could see that pick happening. But there's got to be a lot of dominoes that fall before the Steelers are. Before Landon Dickerson is the best player available on the Steelers board.
Just, hey, listen, if that's the way that things fall, trade it on back.
Yeah.
Trade it on back.
I agree.
All right. Let's get this rolling. I'm betting Trevor Lawrence goes number 1. Look at that.
Oof.
Zach Wilson 2. Okay, let me pause here because this isn't related to the Steelers. Justin Fields went number 3. Are you buying this Mac Jones at number 3 smokescreen whatsoever, or is it that they move up to get Justin Fields?
So from what I'm hearing from, people that I know that work and cover the 49ers, it sounds like Mac Jones is the guy. And I don't want to believe it, but I think that I just don't want to believe it. I don't know because if they're saying it, and if I was saying Landon Dickerson at 24, people will kind of look at me like I'm crazy. But I kind of feel like that's the same way with Mac Jones, and it's a pretty good possibility.
Did they really need to move up to 3? Like, I can understand if they felt like they had to jump a team like Denver at 9 or something like that for Mac Jones potentially, but to number 3 to get him, like, that seems a little rich.
I don't know, but I feel the same way about Justin Fields. Like, if you're going to jump to 3, why did you go to 3 when there's going to be one of the 5 available where you already were?
Yeah, see, I get that to an extent. For me, though, and I do think that like that top 4 in most years, any one of those top 4 are QB1, in my opinion. That's how I feel about those top 4. But for me, I have Justin Fields a little bit higher than Zach Wilson. So them going to number 3 and getting him, I would completely understand. Also, you got to worry about Atlanta, which they're a wild card at number 4. I have no idea what their plan is because they could certainly go quarterback, but with the way that they've restructured Matt Ryan's deal, like the next 2 years, his dead cap hit number would be absolutely massive. They can't move on from that. So even if you take a quarterback, Matt Ryan's still to be on the roster. So why not just?
If they're taking Mac Jones at number 3, I want to know Kyle Shanahan's explanation as to why over Justin Fields or Trey Lance, because I just feel like the other two and their skill set fit his offense better.
I think that I feel like it's the system. Like, I mean, I hate that Kyle Shanahan is a system guy, but I think that's how it goes. Is Mac Jones is the system. Trey Lance is a system quarterback. Justin Fields is not. So that's why I think that they've removed him from that, consideration, I guess. And I don't know. I wouldn't be surprised if they went Trey Lance at number 3, honestly, before they went Justin Fields.
And I would be more on board with that than Mac Jones. The thing I don't get with Mac,
gone by. By the way,
the thing I don't get with Mac Jones is the comparisons to him. And I'm not a huge NFL, comparison guy for guys that are coming out. But when you sit there and say, yeah, he fits Shanahan because he's kind of like, a Matt Ryan or a Jimmy Garoppolo, a guy on the roster right now. Why would you trade up to the number 3 pick to just get the exact same guy you have on the roster right now, just now on a rookie deal?
Doesn't make any sense to me. None. But I haven't understood it from the beginning. I would have just given Jimmy Garoppolo the job and said, hey, we could use a normal first-round pick on something to boost the offense. But I don't know.
I think that we may have run into the Steelers, not necessarily mine, but the Steelers' worst nightmare, because Travis Etienne also went 1 pick before us.
Oh, that's rough.
So we see Najee Harris and Travis Etienne both gone. I mean, I feel like, no, I don't know if you're on board with this. Do you feel like, I think it's safe to assume Najee Harris is the running back that they want to fall to 24. If Travis Etienne would be there and Najee Harris not, do you feel like they're comfortable enough to make that pick as well? Like, is he plan B?
I think he is plan B depending on who's there. Now, Sam Cosmi being still on the board, I think that would make things real interesting because I think that they're pretty neck and neck, and I think the Steelers like both of them a lot. So that would make it real interesting. But just to answer your question, I think that it goes Najee is pretty high, and then Travis Etienne probably mixes in with a lot of the other guys from other positions.
Okay. We did get a couple trade offers. I declined the one just because anytime it brings up future picks, that's kind of pointless because we're not making them today anyway. This one from Green Bay would be interesting. The only thing here is, and I don't know, I feel like I'm asking you 20 questions here, and you might not have the answer to this. I know that they try to keep things as close to the best as possible. Do you feel like trading back is even on the mind of the Pittsburgh Steelers?
No, I don't. I think that the Steelers are real comfortable with their 8 picks. I think that that's a good amount of picks for them. And the Steelers know they need to fill gaps. So they're not trying to go down and just get guys that would fill roles. Like, they need instant starters. 24th pick, you're going to get an instant starter.
I agree with you. I think if anything, you could see them maybe trade back at 55, depending on what the board looks like, but I don't see it happening at 24.
Yep, I agree.
So, okay, let's reject this, and then we got some discussion to have here. You mentioned Sam Cosmi. Based off the way that the board looks, I don't think that the value's there to go. I mean, we've seen them get mocked edge rushers a couple times. I don't see that.
Nope.
Christian Barmore, defensive tackle, don't see that either, especially, the Steelers just don't seem to value that position that much anyway, but especially with Tyson Alualu coming back, I think that's off the board.
Yeah, I think the Steelers have faith in Carlos Davis, as crazy as that sounds too. I don't think they've given up on him yet.
No, yeah, and I don't think that they have reason to. So Sam Cosmi, Creed Humphrey, potentially, although if Landon Dickerson is their number one center, that probably wouldn't be in play. I mentioned Tevin Jenkins. He's still on the board there.
Yeah.
Zaven Collins, who's been thrown around a lot, a versatile linebacker who can also give you a little bit of edge rush help as well. But again, they didn't attend his pro day, or at least they didn't send the full house to the pro day.
I think what changes when it comes to Collins is a couple of weeks ago, they didn't have Vince Williams, and now that they've signed him, I just don't. I think that there's more important needs than somebody to play a third linebacker.
Now, Caleb Farley's interesting too, I think. Corner. I would throw his name potentially in the mix, but if it's going to be corner, I'm getting a sense that like Asante Samuel Jr. would be the guy, and that could be a little bit of a reach, if you will, on how most people would view the board, taking him at 24. But I mean, if the medicals all check out, Caleb Farley was CB1 at one point in this class. Yeah.
Caleb Farley is a name. I think the issue or the concern is Asante Samuel Jr. can play the inside and the outside.
Yeah.
And I think Cam Sutton's going to be the guy. I mean, I don't think it's he might play the outside. I think it's a definite that it's going to be him and Joe Hayden on the outside, and they're going to need somebody on the inside. I think Elijah Molden deeper in the draft is a name that they're going to watch a lot of film on.
I love him.
Oh, yeah.
I mean, Beefy knows I've been pounding the table for this guy since the first mock draft that we've done. I mean, I think he's going to immediately step in and be an elite player in the slot. I do think, though, another name that I'll throw out there for cornerback, assuming that, they want Cam Sutton to play outside and they're looking for inside help, Aaron Robinson out of Central Florida, a guy that originally started out at Alabama. He just seems like he's a willing tackler, and I think that the Steelers will obviously covet that facet of his game. But, man, so if the board falls like this, I think Samuel Cosme makes this interesting, because otherwise I would say just based off the names that we're hearing for the Steelers, I mean, it would have to be like one of these guys.
Yeah.
Or I would potentially somebody further down the board.
I would think that Caleb Farley is first on their list, but I don't think cornerback is the first round option for the Steelers. I don't think they're thinking cornerback unless like maybe somebody crazy falls to them. I don't think Caleb Farley is the crazy slide that they're looking for.
Do you think the lack of Sam Cosme Steelers connection is due to the fact that most people just assuming he's going to be off the board at that point?
Yeah, definitely. I mean, the Steelers talked to him at his pro day. He said that he hasn't had a ton of discussion with the Steelers, but they have been in contact, and that's really all you need. I mean, the Steelers talked to Chase Claypool one time at his pro day. Most of the time was at the Senior Bowl. So, you don't really know when they're making contact with these guys. I think that they've definitely had at least a discussion.
I remember when we were down at the Senior Bowl, like they were all over. Like we rarely saw the Steelers talking to anybody, but we did see them talking to Van Jefferson a couple times. And then for them to go a different route at that same position was like, okay, wow. So maybe this lack of communication isn't the end all be all when it comes to making their picks.
Exactly.
So I don't know. We're thinking what, Sam Cosme the pick here, or
I would say Cosme. I don't know what you guys are feeling.
I mean, I personally would say Cosme. I guess the only question is, do we think that's a realistic possibility if he's there? And you kind of answered my question. I'm just based off not really hearing that much surrounding his name.
Mm-hmm.
That's why I'm a little like, is this realistic? But again, it could just be because there's not much going on in the fact that you think he's not going to fall.
Yeah, I think that if he did fall to 24, I think he is the best player available, which, doesn't have to necessarily mean that he was even a realistic option for the Steelers. I think if he wasn't there, Creed Humphrey would be the move, which is, I think, a bit of a stretch, but I think that would be the move. But since Cosme fell, I think the Steelers would jump on that.
Tyler, what do you think? Because I'm on board with Cosme as well.
Yeah, Cosme's my pick. He's a guy that, I mean, early on before his pro day and everything, I was mock drafting him a lot to the Steelers.
Mm-hmm.
So I feel like that's the easy pick there.
Now, Noah, they obviously want to get an immediate starter at 24. So what does that do for, one of Chukes Okorafor or Zach Banner?
I don't know. I think it makes it tough. I don't know. I think the weirdest thing they did this offseason was bring in Joe Haig, but I think that I don't think he's there when the season starts. He's kind of just like a Stefan Wisniewski type guy.
Okay.
because I think they want Chooks to be like that jumbo tackle that could play both sides, fill in when needed and play a big tight end role because he's real versatile. Banner's obviously the starter, but I don't think either of them are a left tackle. I mean, Chooks, I would go Chooks over Banner, but I don't think either of them are, good enough to play that
that's why I've said, like, I like Zach. I like Banner in the run game. I think he's a mauler in the run game, but I question the athleticism and the ability to face these freak athletes that you see off the edge now.
Exactly. That's what held him back in the draft. I mean, he came into the NFL as a left tackle, played left tackle at USC, but he can't move. He can't move quick enough. Even after he lost all the weight, I don't trust him to move quick enough.
Mm-hmm. Like what's Banner gonna do against Myles Garrett?
He's not.
That's the big question for me. I mean, he's the top edge rusher that the Steelers are going to face in the division. So,
yeah, he's not. Put him up against Jadeveon Clowney. We'll be fine.
Samuel Jr. just went at 51. He almost got to us, but
Oof.
I'm thinking. Okay, I'm thinking. I know that there hasn't been, going back to maybe a lack of contact here. So, do you think that the Steelers though still would settle for a player like Javonte Williams?
Do I think they would settle for a player like Javonte Williams? I think Javonte Williams is the perfect fit for the Pittsburgh Steelers. I think that it's just like Cosme. They don't believe that he's going to be around. The fact that he is still around, I mean, just like you said, you watch them talk to a bunch of these players at the Senior Bowl 2 years ago or last year, and they went a different way than you would have expected. And they talked to Chase Claypool like one time at the Senior Bowl. Yeah. I would believe it's the same way. I mean, they didn't get the opportunity, or we at least didn't get to see them talk to these players at these events. So I would think there is some contact between the two of them.
When I say settle, I mean, I'm going under the assumption of they view Harrison Etienne as RB1 and RB2 on their board.
Oh yeah.
So Williams will be no higher than RB3 for them. I absolutely love Javonte Williams. The fact that he's, younger than both those guys, has less touches on his body, as you mentioned, kind of fits the mold a little bit better. I think he's the perfect fit. I would love if he fell here. I think he's a top 35 to 40 player, so I don't think he would be here. But if he was here, I think that they jump on that because I think that there's a clear separation when you look at the running back class after him.
Yeah, I agree. I think I did hear this. An NFL scout told me that the gap between Najee Harris, Travis Etienne, and the rest of the class is huge, way bigger than we think, just because, there's all these exciting running backs. But at the same time, last year, he compared it to last year with Cam Akers, who was considered a significant gap from the rest of them and had just as good a year as guys like J.K. Dobbins. So I look at it like that. These guys could come in and contribute, even if teams aren't as high as them as we are, And Javonte Williams, I mean, that fits the mold. He's an instant starter.
Yeah, I don't even know if there's I guess Landon Dickerson's there. I think it's Javonte Williams here. But
Landon Dickerson makes it interesting.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think that makes it. I mean, Javonte Williams, a very, obviously I think the best player on the board, but is he the best player for the Steelers? Is there, a possibility that they get somebody in the third, that we're going to have the opportunity to draft somebody in the third? That's up to you guys.
So the only thing that I'm thinking about here is if Landon Dickerson is still on the board, and if we go that route, he's still going to be on the board after pick 55. And then I looked at the rest of this. I mean, how many guys on this? Oh, never mind. When did
Creed Humphrey went? Yeah.
Quinn Miners 40. That's what I was looking for.
Oh, yeah.
Quinn Miners.
Yeah, that's what I was about to say. Is if you took a running back now, there's a bigger drop off than if you would have waited on a center with Landon Dickerson, Josh Myers, and Quinn Miners. But Quinn Miners is gone. Yep,
it's essentially what they did with Chase Claypool last season. There was a bigger drop off from J.K. Dobbins to the rest of them, so they went with the wide receiver.
Yeah, so I guess what we have to figure out is how many centers here are you comfortable with taking, as opposed to how many running backs here you'd be comfortable with taking.
I'm still comfortable. I think realistically, the Steelers would be comfortable enough to go down to Trey Sermon of Ohio State. I don't think that he would walk in there and be an instant starter, but I think they'd be comfortable enough to wait on him. But I could see them taking any of them. I mean, Kenneth Gallowell from Memphis is a dude who is going to be super overlooked because he didn't play last season, but he's a guy that I think he is exactly like a Javonte Williams when it comes to the Steelers' needs. He just fits it pretty well.
Yeah, I actually think he's probably the second best receiving back of this class. Yeah, that's man. If Miners were still on the board here, I think it'd be more interesting because you would still leave the possibility of two centers going from pick 56 to our next pick at 87, and still being able to get one of those three guys.
Now I think you have to take Landon Dickerson.
Yeah,
just because Miners is gone. Because your next pick is until 87. Are you really banking on Josh Myers going to be there?
Exactly. And are you really banking on Josh Myers being as good of a competition with BJ Finney and JC Hassenauer as Landon Dickinson? Or, like, I don't know. I think that
as much as we love Javonte, I feel
exactly.
like
I think it's more of a love-hate thing. Like, I think, Williams is just flashy, but Landon makes sense.
Yeah, we're going to go with that. Man, does that hurt, though?
Maybe he slides. You never know.
Slides to 87.
I think he's going to go.
We're all watching, like, just waiting for him to go.
I'm going to guess one of these couple picks right here, top of third.
Here's where it gets interesting.
Well, the Jets did take ETN, so.
True. Here's where it gets interesting. What if Elijah Molden and Michael Carter before Javonte Williams?
Nice.
Interesting. With the next pick, do you start to consider a cornerback over a running back, depending on who's there?
Listen, he just went to Atlanta at 70. I was going to pause and just ask a question, but I think so. I mean, I think that they will. It's not necessarily what I don't see a way, though, also at the same time that the Steelers leave day 2 without a running back if they don't get one in day 1.
No.
I don't see it. I mean,
I don't see it either, but at the same time, depending on who's there, if now, I think it does. I think it depends on who's here. I don't, because there's after the guy from Memphis, there's Gallowell. Am I saying that right?
Gainwell.
I think you're mixing Kenny Golladay and Kenneth Gainwell.
That's who I couldn't get his name down. I've been saying that all day. If he's still on the board, then that's one thing. But if he's not on the board, I mean, is Trey Sermon a second day guy? I mean, I don't really think so.
What if Elijah Molden is at 87?
That's what I mean. I think Elijah Molden is a better fit at 87. I think that's a steal at 87.
I think he's going to go to Tennessee at 85 anyway.
Yeah?
Well, or he goes at 84.
84. That's
okay. All right. So, no. Okay. So Gainwell is still there.
At 85. Who are we looking at?
I said Kenneth Gainwell is still there.
That's a good pick. Who else is still there as a center or as a corner? I mean, nobody crazy.
What's available at tight end?
Oh, now we're getting interesting.
Tommy Tremble.
Tommy Tremble's a good name too.
That's my guy.
That's the one. If he was still there, I could at least throw his hat in the race.
Yeah, that's a good name.
That's my guy, man. I think he is potentially, like, obviously we know who tight end 1 is of this class and Kyle Pitts, but like, is tight end 2 for sure Pat Freiermuth? Because I love Tommy Tremble, and if you're talking about ceiling, I think that he still has so much untapped potential.
Oh yeah, ton.
And he could end up being tight end 2 of this class. I liked Brevin Jordan a lot, and then his pro day comes, not a great pro day. You turn on the tape, obviously he's a mismatch, if you line him up in the slot or put him out wide. And, he has a willingness to block, just not very good at it. Tommy Tremble's the complete package.
Yeah, I agree. I think that the Steelers like him too. They love their Notre Dame guys. Chase is pulling for him. Stefan's pulling for him. Michael Bursch is pulling for him.
So okay, how about we do this? Let's all say one player that we would, pound the table for at this pick. And if two of us have the same guy, that's clearly the guy. If not, we have a little bit of a discussion.
Oh, I think me and Tyler are both gonna pound the table for Tommy Trimble right now.
Yeah.
Really? Okay.
Let me see the running backs real quick. Because I know Kenneth Gain was the top one.
Yeah.
Okay. He still got Trey Sermon. I mean, maybe you hope he's there.
Here's the thing: if you add somebody to the running back room that isn't Gainwell or Sermon, are we able to definitively say that they're better than what we have on the roster right now? And the roster stinks right now.
No, definitely not.
No,
but at the same time, are you comfortable with Eric Ebron being your blocking tight end and Zach Gentry being your backup?
No,
I think they understand that as well.
But let me also say this, and maybe you can provide some insight on this. I think just because of the way that this year has played out for them, this offseason has played out for them, it hasn't happened yet. I don't think that they're done in free agency. I think they're waiting until the comp pick formula is out of the equation. I think they still could add another tight end.
I think that's a possibility, but I think I could see that happening. And I've said that the whole time that I could see that happening, like an aging tight end. But I think it comes down to who they believe will play a more important role right now and next season. And are you confident that, Kenneth is going to come in here and be a starter day one over Benny Snell Jr.? I mean, as crazy as that sounds, the Steelers do like Benny Snell Jr. and they obviously like Anthony McFarland. So and they've done crazier things than start a Benny Snell Jr. in week one.
Yeah, and I understand the Anthony McFarland stuff too. I mean, obviously, rookie year, he's going to have a different offensive coordinator, an offensive coordinator he's very familiar with now. The games needs to slow down for him, which seemed like the processing wasn't there for him last year. So I am intrigued to see what he can do in year two. I just look at this, and maybe it's also in part due to how high I am on Gainwell. I like Gainwell more than Michael Carter.
Oh, me too.
So
I agree.
So I that's who I would take here. But if you guys are both on board with Tremble, that's the way that we're going.
Here's what I'll say. I think Kenneth Gainwell will fit really well in a Matt Canada offense, especially with his pass catching. And I think he at least has the potential to have the bigger impact right away just because of the position that he plays and the Steelers need. However, I think Tommy Tremble could have the bigger impact over a period of time with the Steelers. So that's where I'm like, okay, maybe Tommy Tremble is the long play here.
I kind of agree. I think that – so the way I look at it is the Steelers, first off, they love their tight ends way more than their running backs. Eric Ebron is not a guy that's going to be here forever. If they have somebody to replace him next season, they will. And you're kind of taking a risk with Gainwell at putting him in the running back room because you have – what if Benny Snell Jr. comes into the offseason and he explodes, or Anthony McFarland comes into the offseason and he explodes? You have a lot of developing guys, and I'm not somebody who's going to say either of them are going to be a top-tier running back in 2021. I'm just saying that if the Steelers left an imperfect draft but took a chance on a guy who could be a star tight end over a guy who could be an okay running back, they'd feel pretty good about that.
Yeah, and I think the argument is also there too. The same as the people that say you got to beef up the offensive line before you add a running back, fix everything around the running back before you add the running back. Tommy Tremble would definitely improve the run game as well.
Exactly. I think that I think that Zach Gentry is much more of a red flag than Anthony McFarland and Benny Snell Jr. And
I think he should put on 50 pounds and try to play left tackle.
Oh, no doubt. But I don't even think
6'8".
Yeah, it's 6'8". Yeah, but he still can't even. He can barely block. I mean,
yeah,
I don't know.
And maybe with Matt Canada as offensive coordinator, these guys look like new running backs as well.
Exactly. And that's another thing is how much are the Steelers actually going to run the ball right up the middle? Because I think they're going to play a lot of shotgun. I think they're going to throw out of the backfield, and they're going to do a lot of jet sweeps and crazy stuff like that.
Basically, just look at Pitt's 2016 offense. That's basically what the Steelers are going to try to be.
Exactly.
So we're going Tommy Tremble here then?
That's what Noah and I are saying.
I'm thinking Tommy. I'm thinking if it was realistic, I think that would be the pick over Kenneth Gainwell.
The only other guy that I thought of here that I didn't bring up, I know he's listed as a safety, but Javon Holland's going to play in the slot, I think, most of his career. And he's an interesting guy because he's fallen a little bit based up, and he just went to Cleveland, so that sucks.
Yeah, Smitty, I was going to say Brady Christensen went to Cleveland too, so go figure. BYU guys go under my team's rivals.
Yeah.
It's America's greatest pastime.
Walker Little is an interesting name. He just went to LA.
Yeah.
I've heard a lot of people say that he could slide to the third or fourth round and be a starter year one.
Well, 2019, like if you go back and watch him in 2019, he looks like a first rounder.
Yeah, I mean he played 2-3 games last season because of an injury,
something like that. Yeah,
that's why.
And it just wasn't very good. So
just went to San Francisco.
Oh, what do they need another running back for?
They don't.
I'm pretty sure they have 10.
They need another 1,000-yard rusher
that nobody remembers.
Yeah.
Okay, so
Kyle Trask
to Atlanta.
To Atlanta. I kind of like that actually.
Much better than
Trey Sermon to Cleveland too. That's a big one off the board.
Why?
That hurts. That one hurts.
Chubb and Hunt.
Nah, that makes no sense. I mean, he'll never play, but
we're getting not taking a running back.
It could end up that way, but like that could be that could realistically be what happens. Like, I don't know. Like the fall off so deep, and the Steelers picks are so spread out. I don't see how. Like, it's either you're gonna miss a position somewhere, and like it comes down to do you want to put more faith in B.J. Finney, Benny Snell Jr. or Chukes Okorafor? So, like who are you starting day one that you shouldn't?
Don't forget, we have the legend Kalen Badledge. So,
yeah.
Whatever. We need 1 yard. Okay. So, we're on the board here. Pick 128.
I'm not so enthused about it.
This is what we got right now. So, you look at this and you say, okay, like Cosme, Dickerson, Tremble, that's not a bad haul. You're definitely improving the blocking aspect of the run game.
That's a lot of beef.
It's a lot of beef, and the Steelers had no beef last season. So, I think, I mean, at this point, if there's no running backs, are you thinking corner maybe? Are you looking at corners?
I would look at, potentially a corner, and if not there, maybe some edge help because I don't think they need a starter, but they need depth at that position.
Yeah, I agree.
But let me look. So this is what the running backs look like. Have you heard any connection between the Steelers and any of the guys on this board?
Honestly, no. And it's tough because names like Chubba Hubbard obviously were like linked to the Steelers as a mid-round option early, but they've all sizzled out. All of these mid-round running backs, I think, I don't think the Steelers have spent much of any time looking at any of them because they're thinking go big or go home. Yeah,
because they're planning on getting one of those top two early. But if those guys are gone, what's the fallback?
Benny Snell Jr. It's crazy to think, but it really is. Like, I think honestly, the Steelers have a lot of faith in them.
On the board right now, the two that I would look at taking would be Khalil Herbert from Virginia Tech or Kylan Hill from Mississippi State. But Kylan Hill, you're definitely not taking right here. No. Khalil Herbert, I mean, you might, but
that's the thing. Like this, first. At this point, you're probably just adding a guy to throw into the mix and hope that he comes out a stud. And if you could if the Steelers can fill another position, I think they wait it out. Which it sucks. People would be real upset, but like we said, I think Matt Canada's offense looks real different than James Conner running the football 20 times a game.
Tyler Hurnley says Stevenson is interesting. I'm assuming he means Ramondre Stevenson.
Yeah.
Or does he mean Marquez? They're both on the board, but it's probably the running back. It's probably Ramondre.
Yeah, I mean, I'm honestly not that big on Ramondre Stevenson, and I don't know. I don't really have a good enough reason why, but maybe he would do well in a Matt Canada offense coming from Oklahoma. But I think I would like a couple other running backs other than him.
That's what I mean. I mean, what's
The
the
running-
difference between him and like an Anthony McFarland, just a speed back kind of guy?
The running back really the only running back that I look at here and do think he would be the best, and this is just me thinking this. There's by no means this is a guarantee. The only running back that's on the board here that I think would end up being the number one on the depth chart is Khalil Herbert.
Yeah, I agree. But and it might be the best player. He might be the best player, that they need right now.
Yeah.
What's that?
But I think it depends.
Corner?
This is what's available at corner.
Yeah, this is
nothing great.
Nothing great. Nothing great.
What about
Nothing
Edge?
great. Trey Brown is another name later in the draft that they could look at. He's a guy that could play inside, but he'll be there for a minute. He's not going to be.
They've also met with Shakur Brown from Michigan State. I've seen that, but I don't know, to what extent those talks were like. And this is what's there at edge. And Dalen Hayes is a guy that they've met with as well.
Yeah,
now, when you talk about edge, do you think it's more likely they go an outside linebacker route or a defensive end, or does it not matter? Just somebody that rushes the passer?
No, I think they would go. I mean, I don't think it would play a huge factor because you have to remember Alex Highsmith was a defensive end in college, but I think they would more than likely go with an outside linebacker because they're looking for somebody to play, more of an Anthony McFarland role, or not an Anthony McFarland, an Anthony Chickalo role than, a Cam Hayward, Stephon Tuitt type of guy.
Yeah.
Hayes is an interesting name. At 128, I mean, that's not a bad pick, honestly.
Is he more of a defensive end, though?
Yeah, he is a defensive end. But again, like I said, Alex Highsmith was a defensive end. Yeah.
Yeah, I think it's more about the build of the guy.
Yeah, it's just about whether he fits. And especially, not everybody's a TJ Watt. More guys are going to be like Bud Dupree and Alex Highsmith than they are TJ Watt.
I mean, looking at the board, the only two guys I'd pick are Dalen Hayes or Khalil Herbert. I'm not really interested in any of the corners right now.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, yeah, Khalil Herbert's a good name. What are we in the 4th round right now?
Yeah.
That's a good name in the 4th round. I mean, a guy that could still come in here, at least compete. He's going to compete better than the rest of them.
I think that's where we go. This is the first of the 4th round picks. So maybe one of the edge guys, maybe Dalen Hayes is there at 140. I mean, that's not out of question, I don't think.
No, I don't think it is either.
Man, this is just falling a lot differently than I was expecting coming into this. Because, I knew that with this being our last one before the draft, I was like, we should make this one as realistic as possible. Hopefully, Najee Harris or Travis Etienne are there for us to talk about.
John Wade is another name that I could have saw them taking a chance on. I think the 4th round's early, though, for him.
The edge options are still there, and honestly, those are two of the 3 best names on the board.
Yeah, I mean, if they're going to pick out anybody, at this point, they're going to meet with guys or pick guys that they met with, and Hayes is the move. In my opinion,
I do agree with Jake in the comments here about Cam Sample. I like him a bit, but just based off the fact that we have seen the Steelers linked to Dalen Hayes, I think he's the guy here. Trying to make it as realistic as possible and not just what we would do in this spot.
I agree. I mocked Cam Sample multiple times early on, but
yeah. It's Dalen Hayes, and now this is the spot where we wait a little bit. The Steelers not having a 5th round pick, at least as of right now.
Yeah, I don't. This is where it could get interesting. I could see them moving back or jumping around. Like you said, though, I think it comes down to that 55th pick. I think that if there's a name there that they do want or that they believe is worth the 55th pick, they'll keep it. If not, I think they could definitely move back.
Yeah, I'm looking at it potentially 2 ways. I definitely think that they want to stay at 24. Even regardless of what the board looks like, I think that they will stay at 24. When it gets to 55, I think it's either going to be a case where there's so many guys on the board that they like that they'd be comfortable with any of them and they decide to move back, or there's not a player there that they like at all. So I think that would be the spot more likely for them to move back than 24. And I wouldn't mind seeing it happen, although that's hard to say without knowing how the board's going to fall. I just like the idea of them potentially getting a little bit of extra draft capital.
Yeah,
when they have so many needs to fill.
I agree.
I mean, looking at positions that we haven't addressed yet.
Our mock draft show is only day 1, because imagine doing this day 3 and we have to wait through all this.
Yeah.
No, imagine doing it for every round, day 2 as well. Even I know, man. Shout out to Jake and those guys last year for doing that for day 2 as well. Did they do it on day 3? Why can't I remember now? If they did, I don't think I was on there with them. But day 1 and day 2, they definitely did.
That's a long day. They're very long days.
I don't know if they did day 3. I know we were on day 1 and day 2 because we were on. Well, Steelers didn't have a first round pick, but we were on, and then day 2 we were on for like the Claypool and Highsmith picks.
Mm-hmm. Which the Claypool one took me by surprise. Highsmith did not. Like, we were talking about it the entire time, like how much the fit made sense.
Yeah.
Yeah. And we had a lot of optimism after they made that pick.
Yeah. Alex Highsmith was the perfect fit. I did see Chase Claypool coming. Yeah, I was one of the few. I just think that, for one, it's a Notre Dame connection. The Steelers love Notre Dame players. Also, we haven't drafted anybody from Maryland, so we need to keep an eye out for that.
That's on us.
Yeah, no, I didn't even think about it. Kobe Stevens, good name for the Steelers. Real crazy. Like, I don't know why more people haven't talked about that, especially because he plays everywhere. But yeah, Maryland guys. But Chase Claypool just made a ton of sense. But I didn't see Juju coming back, even if it was for a $1.4 million cap hit. So that was on me. Trey Brown gone. I don't think Jacoby's going to stay.
Yep.
Do you think this 1-year deal for Juju opens up the possibility of him signing an extension next year, or do you think it's just a one-off?
No, I think it definitely opens up the possibility of him signing next year. Because
they'll have a lot more money next year, right?
Exactly. They'll have a lot more money to spend next year. The cap will be bigger. James Washington will need a new contract, and if they're going to move on from either of them, they're going to move on from James Washington. I think it makes a lot of sense. And they'll probably sign TJ this offseason, if I had to guess. There's definitely been some talks from, things I've heard. And from there, I think, you have to take care of smaller pieces. And then I don't see why Juju doesn't get a contract, especially if a lot of it's taken care of this offseason before.
How much a year are we talking for TJ, if you had to guess?
If I had to guess, man, it's so hard because the Steelers are a team that are going to give you a fair compensation, but they're also going to ask you to, take a little bit of a, you love the Steelers hit. Yeah. How big is that hit going to be? Because he deserves Myles Garrett money. He should be at $25 million a year or pretty freaking close. And I don't think he's going to get there. I think he's going to be like 21.
I think the bigger question is the guaranteed.
Oh, the guaranteed will be huge. The guarantee will be huge. This will be TJ Watt's contract will break probably every Steelers guaranteed money record ever.
Combined.
That's what they'll make up for him in a little hometown discount. They'll give him
exactly, and they do that, and they that's why I think it won't be Myles Garrett money, and people will probably be like, oh well, he deserves Myles Garrett money. He'll get a couple of signing bonuses. He'll get his contract worked out a couple of times where he'll make the same amount of money. There's no worries about that.
So we are on the board here. Let's take a look again just to see what we got. We got Cosme, the tackle out of Texas, Dickerson, the center out of Alabama, Tommy Tremble, the tight end out of Notre Dame. Maybe the first pick that I would say it's not completely off the wall, but might be a surprise for them to go tight end before running back, but we just felt the value was higher there. Khalil Herbert, then we go running back, Virginia Tech, Dalen Hayes to get some edge help. Looking at the board right now, and I would say position-wise, we should target a cornerback here. The only thing that I'm looking at is my favorite player that's left on the board is Justin Hilliard, the linebacker of Ohio State. I'm not sure. So this is just obviously, draft boards are different on every site. This is much lower than where I would have him. I think that there's a lot of conversation about all the Ohio State linebackers. I think that this is, and I'm not, trying to say this guy's going to come in and be a 3-down linebacker by any means. But I think with what he offers in pass coverage, at some point he could carve out a nice role for himself. And even with Vince Williams being back for another year, I do think it's just 1 year. No, I don't know if you've seen the same stuff, but I saw something the other day about he plans to play this year and then potentially transition into a coaching role.
Yeah, I did see that. I haven't heard that personally. And you have to 3 months ago, at the end of the season, 4 months ago, Vince Williams was putting on Instagram that he was playing the best football of his life at 31 years old. So I don't know. I think that being cut definitely took a little whack at morale. And it'll depend, but I think either way he's replaced next season. I think that his 1-year deal is the end of his time in Pittsburgh. I don't know if they'll draft an inside linebacker. I mean, Justin Hilliard at this point in the draft is a steal, but I mean, it depends a little bit on how much faith you have in Marcus Allen and how much faith you have in Antoine Brooks, because I think they want that versatile, safety hybrid player. And if either one of them is it, then they don't really need anybody else.
Listen, I love Marcus Allen, but from what I saw last year, he's just not big enough to be able to do the linebacker transition.
I do agree. But I don't think that he's big enough. I think that his form tackling isn't as strong as, a guy like Vince Williams. Like Vince Williams will tackle you perfectly every single time. Marcus Allen will run into you full head of steam every single time, and half the time he's going to miss you. So I think that's the difference. But I mean, maybe he's an option for more of a slot guy this season. I don't know. I think that they will work him in to some degree. But Justin Hilliard, like you said, that's a steal right here.
Yeah, I really wish that UG3 was healthy, man, because I think that he has the traits, too, of, a modern-day linebacker with what he offers in coverage. But it doesn't really matter if he can't stay on the field.
No, he can't stay healthy. I think at this point, it's hurt him to a point where he's almost an afterthought. I mean, he was active, 6 games last season? Not even?
Something he got hurt again. Yeah, same thing. His back, which was the same thing that knocked him out, put him on IR his rookie year. He got put on IR again last year because of back issues that he was hopeful that they caught it in time where he wouldn't miss too much time. And then I was talking to him about it. And then 2 days later, he was put on IR. So it's unfortunate, but I don't know. I think that the Vince Williams addition, but coming back rolls them out of taking a linebacker early. But I don't know that it rules them out from taking one completely. I think right here it's either Justin Hilliard or it's a cornerback if the value is potentially there. I don't know. The only one that I'm looking at here is a late round flyer, and it wouldn't be with this pick. It'd be one of the final 2 picks we have would be Darren Hall to San Diego State, just because I know that they've met with him at least once, and he is going to be, pretty much stuck in that slot role. He's not going to touch the outside due to his size, but he would be interesting.
No, he would be interesting. I don't think the Steelers are sold on finding a starting cornerback. That's why I didn't name a cornerback as their top 3 positions for the first round. Because it's maybe as small of a sample size as he has. I think James Pierre showed enough to at least get a chance next season. And as much as people don't want to hear this, Justin Lane is definitely going to get a chance next season. So I think a cornerback's a position that they'd wait on. At this point in the draft, it's best available, which, that's up for debate.
So the only thing that I would say there is the experience, both those guys, they're long, lengthy corners that have pretty much just been stuck on the boundary. They play outside their entire time as playing cornerback. So if that's the case where one of them is going to be in, a larger role, how can you say that Cam Sutton is going to be replacing Steven Nelson? Where are you getting the snaps inside if all these guys are going to be playing on the boundary? It'll
still be Cam Sutton. Cam will move inside.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying.
From what I'm hearing, it's Cam's going to be, which isn't ideal, but at the same time, it won't be. He won't play. We won't see as much nickel as we saw with Mike Hilton until there's a developed outside corner behind Cam Sutton or a developed inside corner. I mean, honestly, I could to some degree see James Pierre trying out a nickelback spot. I don't think it'll work, but I think at some point in camp, you'll see him at least try it out because he's the smaller of the two. Justin Lane will get destroyed on the inside. But I don't know.
You mentioned Antoine Brooks earlier, talking about like maybe he gets
He's
a
another
shot
name,
there
exactly.
as well. Yeah,
I could see. That's why I said, how much faith you have in him and Marcus Allen, because Antoine Brooks is essentially the guy that they drafted to be who Marcus Allen was last season, and he's a much bigger dude. He played everywhere in Maryland, so he could come in. He just didn't get any opportunity last season, and he could be an option on the inside. I don't think they have a set cornerback list. I think you're going to see a lot of guys bouncing everywhere, which is going to hurt them. But I think every one of them they have enough faith in to play decently well.
I guess here's my point of where I was starting with this as far as the cornerbacks go. If they don't add a cornerback within the first 3 rounds, I think Cam Sutton plays more in the slot than what we're expecting.
Oh, yeah. Well, I think that when people say that Cam Sutton is going to replace Steven Nelson and play on the outside, which he is, that's just going to be on base packages. Once you get into sub packages, he's dropping into the nickel because he's their best option. And I think that'll be like that for probably his whole career. I mean, his contract for one isn't an outside cornerback contract. And for two, you're going to have a much easier time drafting and developing an outside corner than you are an inside corner. And whether it's this season or next season, you'll get a guy on the outside that just eventually doesn't take over for Cam Sutton, but eventually Cam plays way more on the inside than he does on the outside.
All right, so where are you guys at with this? I've already said the guy that I would go with here is Justin Hilliard.
I'm already on board with you because
Okay.
I think he's the best value pick at this position. I mean, the corners you're talking about right here, I mean, you're basically taking a flyer on no matter who you would pick. And Justin Hilliard, I think you at least have more confidence that
Although
he would pan out.
This is very close to Avery Williamson, so that would kind of be seamless.
Shut up.
No,
Yeah,
but
I agree.
okay.
I'm on
So
board too. I think Justin Hilliard's the pick.
All right. Yeah, and that could, it's going to be interesting camp for those inside linebackers if that's the case, because you would think that, a guy like UG3 might not even make the roster.
Yeah, I was going to say, unfortunately, he's probably bottom of the list at this point. But I think he'd have a hard time making the roster either way.
So we have 2 more picks.
There's your boy Dax.
I know.
Dax Milne, Tampa.
That's a good pick.
I feel
Chris
like
Rumpf, man, that's my guy. Like as a late round flyer, when you talk about edge, I mean, I've talked about like Beefy's probably getting sick of me talking about him, but like
we
he
talk
just
about
seems
literally
like
every mock draft.
yeah, I mean the versatility that he has inside and outside, like he just gets to the quarterback. He's a great athlete, the son of a coach, which is why I think the Steelers would fall in love with him. He just works like a Steeler, and I think if he were there with one of these like later 7th round picks, they would definitely take a flyer on him. But I would even, if they took him in the 6th round, I wouldn't question it. All right, so
Just to go back to Dax, I feel like he's a receiver that's going to be overlooked by a lot of NFL teams just because he is from BYU. He's not like a big name either. And everybody's just going to say, oh, well, he had Zach Wilson as his quarterback.
Mm-hmm.
But if they watch Dax actually play, he made a lot of contested catches. He made a lot of diving catches, hard catches. And, yeah, Zach made the throws, but he still had to make the catch too.
Yep.
So
No, I agree.
I think he's going to be a great late-round pick for a team.
I think they will still, as much as we talk about this, I think they're going to add a corner at some point with one of these last 2 picks. If they don't add one earlier, and Darren Hall, the value kind of lines up here. The only other person I would consider here, and it's literally just because of his name, is Rashad Wild Goose. So,
I would say Jason Pinnock a little bit, but he's only going to play on the outside. He can't play inside.
Yeah, he can't play the inside. What safeties are available? Like Trey Norwood's a name that maybe. Paris Ford's a name that maybe, but I think that's the thing. Paris Ford is an interesting pick because the Steelers don't like to draft from Pitt, obviously, but if he's there with their last pick, I mean, they would bring him in anyways. You know what I mean?
Dude, the fact that he has dropped that far on draft boards is crazy.
Crazy.
Compared to what he was last year, people were talking about he could be a fringe first-round pick.
Yep, exactly. And I think the Steelers know that.
What did he take a year off to do?
Nothing. It was just COVID.
What was he doing during this time? Like, I'm gonna opt out, prepare for the draft. I mean,
that's what happened.
Halfway through the season.
I think that's what hurt him. Is everybody just got mad at him that they were just like, he's done. Which, like, I get it, but he's a name. I mean, they don't have a backup safety at all, so he's a name maybe. But you know
who talked about when you talked about like linebacker, and he's gonna pretty much just play special teams. He really didn't play any defensive snaps in Detroit. Miles Killebrew.
Yeah, I see him. He's a good option. He's just gonna play special teams though.
Yeah,
I think he essentially replaces, Jordan Dangerfield, who is good, but
yeah. Man,
I love
Dangerfield, man.
I know he's a great player. Great player. He's a great asset. He's a name that I think could come back at some point. He doesn't go anywhere.
Jake said Wild Goose is a solid in all caps player. I'm gonna have to watch him because I've just heard the name. I have not watched a single snap that this guy's played.
No, I agree. Another thing I could see this late in the draft, I wouldn't be surprised if the Steelers looked at a wide receiver. They always look at wide receivers. And a late speed guy.
Des Fitzpatrick would fit that mold.
I've seen that linked a lot. I mean, obviously, what is he, like 155 pounds? It definitely worries me. I think that's his actual weight is 155 pounds. But
I weighed that in like fourth grade.
Exactly. But he's I don't think that they're sold on Ray to be a punt and kick returner. I think that Ray will have Ray McLeod is who I'm talking about, but he'll have a role on offense. I don't think he has as big of a role on special teams, not a guaranteed one. So maybe.
I like how you had to clarify which Ray you were talking about. like we thought you were talking about another one.
I didn't know, like, somebody be like Ray who? I don't know.
Ray Lewis. That's what we're talking about.
Jake is almost talking me into Rashad Wild Goose, and I haven't watched him play a single snap. Like he said, he had some decent reps against Rashad Bateman, and Bateman.
I feel like whenever we get this far down, Jake is going to know a lot more than we are about these players.
Jake might as well have been on here with us. True. But for me, it's Darren Hall or Rashad Wild Goose. And I said it was just because of the name, but all of a sudden, I'm looking like a genius for throwing his name out there.
All right, so Jake, which one would you pick? Like, I guess that's what we're asking.
Now, the only question is, Jake, because of what we need for the Steelers, does Wild Goose play inside? Would he be able to play in the slot?
That's the question. Darren Hall is a solid slot corner to have this late. Good depth.
Are we just rolling out the other positions now? We're just looking at corner.
Well,
I think
at this point, I think we could take something else here and wait to get him at 254 because I don't think he'd be off the board.
Yeah.
I would think the Steelers at this point, their three positions they're looking at are wide receiver, corner, and safety. But I if Paris Ford doesn't get drafted and they don't believe he's getting drafted, they wouldn't draft a safety. They would just go sign him.
What position, if any, could you see them double dipping, if you will, taking two of? Maybe like edge rusher or something. We know that there's not a lot of depth there.
That's tough. I don't think it would be edge rusher because I don't think there's a lot of depth. I think that it gets pretty narrow.
Jake says Hall, so we're going with Darren Hall there.
Yeah, I like the Darren Hall pick. Double dipping, I don't know. I don't think they double dip in anything because I just don't think it makes any sense. I would say running back maybe, but that doesn't make any sense at all.
Yeah. I'm thinking like, what is, even if they add a Tommy Tremble, like are they comfortable enough? And I guess it'd be this pretty much the same situation as last year. Was Zach Gentry or Kevin Rader as tight end 3?
Yeah, I think so. Because they don't play that big of a role.
Yeah. But if they don't add a tight, if they don't add a tight end, they're going.
If they don't have a tight end, yeah, it plays a big role. At that point, this is sound the alarms. But
they don't have a tight end. I mean, let me ask you, just because we've talked about him every single time, just because he's a BYU guy, do you think they could take a late round flyer on Matt Bushman, even with his Achilles injury last year?
Yeah, I mean, I think they could. I think that he might be. You got to look at tight end is definitely a position. Safety, maybe cornerback, are all positions that they're going to look into are undrafted free agents too. And if he doesn't get drafted, he's easily a name that they could look at because they're going to bring a bunch of guys in and just hope that a couple of them stick. That's what they do every year. That's how James Pierre ends up here.
I'd love it just because I feel like. I've said this multiple times. Steelers haven't had a BYU guy since what's his name? Retired. Not Hoke. Kiesel.
Oh, Brett Kiesel.
Oh, yeah.
Wow,
Yeah.
was he really the last one?
Yeah. So what, 2014?
Sheesh. Yeah, somewhere around there. Yeah, he was definitely here for 2 his rookie year. But I don't remember if he was here the next. So yeah. All right, we're on the board here for our last pick. Des Fitzpatrick went 1 pick before. Otherwise, I mean, I know that there's obviously the weight limitations, and you wonder if he's gonna get beat up in the NFL. But he would have been, I think, worth a late round flyer there. So we obviously have to shift our focus elsewhere.
Trey Norwood is definitely a name to watch.
Yeah.
Very underdeveloped though.
Yeah,
when you're
I
looking
think
at all the other positions, that could be a possibility still.
I
mean,
yeah,
I think it's a safety
not really
regardless,
much there.
because if it's not Trey Norwood, I look at Christian Uphoff, who Nick Farabaugh has actually mocked to them at least one time.
Yeah, another good name. I mean, they're both guys that they're going to come in here and chances are what?
Play special teams, maybe.
Yeah, if they play, or they're going to be they'll have very low expectations to even make the roster. But they're worth a chance, and I think it comes down to safety and wide receiver. I think that's where we're at this point in the draft. Both names that I would go with. The only thing that I'll say is I don't remember the last time the Steelers completed an NFL draft without a wide receiver, but I can say the same thing about a safety.
Yeah,
but
to your point, I kind of, even though I like the names more right now at safety, I think that the route to go for me would probably be adding a receiver and then taking that flyer on an undrafted Paris Ford.
Yeah, because you're going to have one if those 3 safeties are still available, then one of them at least, probably more, are going to be undrafted, and that's where they're going to go. And the Steelers will bring in 100 pick guys before the end of the season. If Paris Ford's there, they'll call him 10 seconds after the draft ends. The problem here is, where do you go wide receiver?
Yeah,
Tyler Vaughns is a good name. Jonathan Abrams Jr. is another one.
I like any receiver from USC, really.
Yeah, me too. I don't know. It's tough. And this is the same thing. They're going to bring in a bunch of wide receivers, as undrafted guys, but I think that, I don't know. They just love to draft wide receivers, as everybody knows. That's no secret.
Lacks deep speed and burst, struggles in battles, possesses a thin build. Consistent, productive, terrific route runner who separates from defenders, catches everything thrown to him, lacks great deep speed. 4th or 5th receiver. I mean, that's pretty much what we'd be asking him to do. Even short or long, more so long term. I mean, if you talk about the fact that, this is James Washington's last year in a contract. Let me ask you this, though, and I don't think that it would happen. Any chance at all that they potentially look to move Washington for, say, like a mid to late round pick before the draft?
Yeah, definitely. I don't think before the draft. I could see during the draft. I think James Washington could be worth a 3rd round pick if you could find the right suitor. I
think 3rd for Martavis, so
that's what I'm saying. And I think that there's way more there. And I don't know how much of Matt Canada's offense is going to come and go in year 1, or how much of his offense is going to come and Randy Fichtner's is going to go. But I don't know how much of James Washington you could incorporate into a Matt Canada offense, because
Yeah.
The dude just doesn't blend well with what Big Ben likes to do, or could do at this point in his career. So yeah, I could definitely see him moving. I mean, I could see them moving on draft day. I wouldn't say beforehand though. No.
Yeah, we're getting pretty close to that as is. So, but yeah, it just crossed my mind because you look at him and you look at Juju. We have two receivers who are, and even Ray McCloud just being back on a 1-year deal if you consider him a receiver. I mean, these guys, as of right now, at least, aren't part of the long-term future. So,
nope. No, and I think that if they traded James Washington at this point, that solidifies that Juju's probably here to stay, because I think Ray McCloud's going to have a pretty big role in 2021. And I just don't see the need for a fifth receiver unless you're going to draft one late. And that's what they could do here. At the same time, they did lose Deion Kane, which I think was the best bet to be that guy that made the roster if James Washington left. So they will need to replace somebody because they have no depth.
All right, so I'm thinking it's going to be one of these three names. Just looking real quick. I don't know a whole lot about any of them, just from what I was reading real quick. Trey Walker would obviously add to their return game. Smaller guy, quick. Vaughn's not as quick, but probably the best route runner out of the ones that are left. And it sounds like Jonathan Adams Jr., probably the highest upside of the guys that are here left. But
yeah, I would say it comes down to Tyler Vaughn's or Adams Jr. I just don't see. I don't think you need another Ray. I think if it was not at this point, I think if it was Fitzpatrick, that's a different, you're at a different tier. But at this point, they're just looking for a guy who could play everywhere.
Yeah, and I think when it's that close of a call, let's just go with the USC pipeline.
Yeah,
that's how I'm looking at it. So
that's what I was about to say too. Draft the guy from USC, and then the next play would be Colin Paris Ford after the draft.
Yep, if he makes it. Watch him go right now.
Last pick of the draft, is he Mr. Irrelevant? Oh, what the?
We don't know. We're going to assume now.
To wrap things up here, Samuel Cosme at pick 24, and we made no trades, by the way. We just stayed in these spots. Samuel Cosme at pick 24, the tackle out of Texas. At 55, we go Landon Dickerson, the center out of Alabama. 87, Tommy Tremble, the tight end out of Notre Dame. 128, Khalil Herbert, running back, Virginia Tech. 140, Dalen Hayes, edge, Notre Dame. 216, Justin Hilliard, linebacker, Ohio State. 245, Darren Hall, the cornerback out of San Diego State. 254, Tyler Vaughns, wide receiver, USC. Man, what was your favorite pick that you would say out of these? Just looking at like the value.
I'd say Tommy Tremble. I mean, outside of, Samuel Cosme is a huge pick. It's obviously a great first-round pick. But I think anybody that you would have got in the first round is going to come in and be an instant starter. I think Tommy Tremble is a guy who could have as big of an impact in 2021 as Chase Claypool did in 2020.
Yeah, Tommy Tremble, he kind of reminds me of like a Kevin Dotson pick from last year, like a mid-round pick that is going to perform like a day one or early day two pick. So that would be mine as well, especially since I was the one that brought him up. No, just saying.
From a value standpoint, I think Justin Hilliard at 216 is really good. But as far as like my favorite actual pick, I'm probably in agreement with you on Tommy Tremble, even though I was trying to go, I would have gone a different direction thinking like the Steelers. But hey, if that's the direction they go, I'm not going to be upset about it. I think we're just going to be sitting there on draft day. I wouldn't say draft day, I guess. After the entire draft is over, wondering, man, we didn't really necessarily solve the running back issue the way that we thought we were going to.
No, but I think that a lot of people will think that. But if you look at it, I mean, if you solve the offensive line, which we definitely did, then your running game is going to get better. James Conner has had nothing to run behind, and you're going to keep Big Ben up, which is huge. That's the most solving the running game, huge. Keeping Big Ben from not getting sacked and having more than 1.2 seconds to throw the football, most important thing they could do in the draft.
No,
listen,
let me ask you about Landon Dickerson. Do his injuries concern you at all?
Yes and no. I think that the abundance of injuries. If it was one injury, it'd be whatever. I think that the fact that he's dealt with a couple of them, that definitely concerns me. But for a second round pick and for a guy that's not guaranteed a starting job, I don't think that there's enough concern to avoid him.
Would you rather have Miners or anyone else?
Creed Humphrey, obviously. But
yeah, Creed Humphrey. But I know there's some people, like we were saying, like if people say they would rather have a guy like Miners over Dickerson because of the injuries, I wouldn't really blame them.
Yeah, I wouldn't either. I think they're on the same level, but I think that potential Dickerson has. He's the number 2, and then everything else falls between that. And with a center, with any other position, that's a different subject. But at center, there's kind of a gap. I think that once you fall below Dickerson, yeah, I get Miners. I think he's there, but I don't trust Miners to come in and be a starter day 1 or week 1 and feel good about it over BJ Finney. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm.
That's a ridiculous rise, by the way. Like he just started like snapping the ball. Like we weren't even sure he's going to be in a center until the Senior Bowl.
Mm-hmm.
And then he was taking all those reps at center, and it was like, okay, he is a center. And now, he's a top 50 player on a lot of boards. So, I mean, I love him. I think he is going to be a really good player. But when you talk about, I know that this is thrown around a lot, pro ready. I think that, like you said, you have Dickerson, who would be my number 1 if the injury concerns weren't there, even over Humphrey. Mm-hmm. You have Humphrey, and then you have a little bit of a gap there. I do like Miners a whole lot more than Josh Myers, though, and I watch a lot of Ohio State. So
yeah, I agree. I think that the most important thing to remember is that the Steelers are, as crazy as the Steelers are always in a win now and win later mode, but I don't think we've ever seen the Steelers more in a win now mode than they are right now. And Dickerson's the guy that fits that mold.
Now, here's what I'll say too, to that point, because I wanted to bring this up real quick to wrap this up. We didn't go running back as early as a lot of people want to see them go. And for me, that's fine. And that's why, like, when I was saying that before, like, that wasn't my opinion of it. Like, oh, I'm sitting here on draft day disappointed we didn't add a running back earlier. I'm speaking for the consensus of Steelers fans, like the consensus of the fan base. I think that what it comes down to is maybe the biggest gripe I think that people have, or like the biggest disagreement you'll see from both sides, is where are the Steelers in terms of, are they ready to compete right now? Do they have a good enough roster to compete at this stage? If everything else on the roster led me to believe that they were legit contenders next year, I wouldn't have a problem with them going running back in the first round. Mm-hmm. And the Steelers will never admit that. Like you said, they're always in win now mode. They're always trying to win a championship. I just don't personally feel like they're a running back away from doing that.
No, exactly. They're an offensive line away from doing that. And that's the biggest difference. I mean, James Conner, if he doesn't get hurt last season, still ends up 1,000-yard rusher somehow, and people seem to overlook that because he had the lowest, he had basically no yards per carry yards per carry. That changes with an offensive line. You have much more time in the run pass option. You run a lot less run pass option when you have a solid offensive line. So I think that, addressing a running back, huge. But the Steelers have no idea what they're getting out of Anthony McFarland or Benny Snell until they have guys that aren't, Villanueva and Marquise Pouncey blocking for them.
If everything else on the roster was very solid, if we had a roster, say like the Buffalo Bills, and we decided to go Najee Harris in the first round, I'd be fine with it. Mm-hmm. I don't think that the value is there for the Steelers specifically to do that.
No, but at the same time, if Najee Harris is there, I think that he is the best player available. Yeah, I don't think that you pass him up. But that's just because I think that you could find a tackle, Liam Eichenberg out of Notre Dame, I think went in the 3rd round in this. So you could find a guy, in the second or 3rd round that could come in and maybe he's not a Sam Cosmi, but he's probably good enough to start and make the offensive line better than, what
I think Liam Eichenberg is definitely a guy that can come in and play right now. Don't think he has a super high ceiling, but I think he has a super high floor.
Mm-hmm. Oh, yeah.
I think he's an NFL starting tackle. I just don't know how, good he's going to be. I don't think he'll ever be an elite player at the position, I guess is what I'm getting at. I think he'll be solid enough to start there.
Yeah, definitely. But the Steelers the Steelers offensive line is bred from guys like Ramon Foster. They're not everybody's a Marquise Pouncey, and that's how they've always been.
I think, too, last thing I want to say, Tyler, I don't know if you have anything else to add to this, but this is obviously like the last Steelers mock draft we're doing before the actual draft. So wanted to say this as well. I think too, just for me with Najee Harris, like I feel like people think that I hate the player because of the way that I talk about him. I don't. I think he's fantastic. He's my RB1. Like I said, in the perfect situation for the Steelers, I would be fine with the pick. I think what it comes down to is, and I don't want to say, oh, just because he's like 23 years old, and obviously everybody talks about the short running back shelf life, but I think that that's a fair point to bring up when you talk about so much uncertainty at the most important position, which is the quarterback position, beyond this year for the Steelers. Like, what good is it going to be having a Najee Harris on the roster? And obviously, it'd be great to lean on him, and obviously, like having a good run game for whoever the next guy is going to be great. But if we're not expecting them to be, a Super Bowl contender beyond Ben Roethlisberger's time here for a couple years at least, what good is it to have a Najee Harris on the roster?
Oh, okay. So I will respond with this. If you're going to put Mason Rudolph in as a starting quarterback next season, which I don't think that's going to happen. I think the Steelers are going to get a quarterback next offseason. I wouldn't be surprised if they traded up into the top 10 to do so. But if you're going to do something crazy like that, or if you're going to put Mason Rudolph or Dwayne Haskins in there as your starting quarterback, having a guy like Najee Harris could change the whole thing. I mean, people are still iffy on guys like Derek Carr. And let's be honest, Derek Carr in Pittsburgh would get obliterated because he'd have nobody to turn to. And right now he has a pretty good running back to turn to. That goes everywhere. I think that if you're a young, underdeveloped quarterback, having a guy to turn to, I mean, it changes everything.
Sure, it's great for them. But what I'm saying is the team's not going to be a Super Bowl contender while Najee Harris is here. So what's the point of having him?
I don't know if I disagree, if I agree with that, because I think that the Steelers are always a quarterback away. They will be a quarterback away from, being a Super Bowl contender next season. But if you have all your pieces, if you look at it like they go out and get Najee in the first round and they somehow clear up, most of the offensive line and a lot of other problems that they have this offseason. Next season, they really don't have a ton of holes that they can't handle or that they'll re-sign. And you could go out and do something crazy like trade up and get a quarterback and boom, you're right there. You're a Super Bowl contender once again. I get it's a rookie, that usually doesn't work out, but I have a hard time believing the Steelers aren't going to keep themselves as a favorite for the AFC North, at least, once Ben leaves.
Well, I think, with the defense and everything, they'll certainly be in contention for a playoff spot pretty much every year.
Mm-hmm.
But I just think that's a huge question mark. And that's, what you're saying as well. Sure, like trade into the top 10, get one of the whoever. And right now, looking at next year's quarterback class, I'm not super intrigued by anybody, but there's going to be guys that, have that like Zach Wilson type rise, separate themselves. There's guys that do that every single year. So I think that somebody will, and maybe that is who the Steelers' next quarterback is. And maybe they do step in right away and make the Steelers a contender, but it's a question. Whereas I guess that's what I'm getting at, is there's so much uncertainty, which is why I would not go the route of taking a running back in the first round.
Yeah, I do agree with you there. I don't think I'm a guy who would go running back in the first round, but I think that it does make a lot of sense. And I don't think it's a wasted pick if they do, because I think it helps out whoever the next quarterback is tremendously when it comes to taking pressure off of them in their first year. After that, that's on the quarterback. But year one, you're going to want a great running back there. And right now they don't have that.
Tyler, what were you about to say before? Because it looked like you were starting to move your mouth, and then I wanted to get that out.
Yeah, mine was still offensive line stuff. So we're just going to go back to that real quick. I wanted to get your thoughts on it because I think we've only mocked a guard maybe once. So do you think that guard would be even on the radar at all for the Steelers? Just because I feel like with DeCastro, you don't really know how much of a future he has left.
Yeah, that's a big if. I think that David DeCastro's got 1, maybe 2 years left in him. Personally, and this doesn't come from him or anything, but David DeCastro did not sound like a guy who was enjoying football last season. And I think that's going to play a role this year. So I would say 1 or 2 more years from David DeCastro. Do you draft a guard now? Maybe, but I would say in the 2nd, 3rd, 4th round, definitely not in the 1st round. You're not looking for a guy to replace him, but you're looking for a Kevin Dotson, to come in and play behind him.
I think
David Moore rambling.
Who was the one from Georgia? The guard from Georgia. I think we drafted
Ben Cleveland.
Yeah. I think he was the one that I think we or maybe we drafted two in two different mock drafts.
Yeah,
because it's only happened a couple times, but
Right.
occasionally,
Yeah, like round
guard
4,
there.
round 5, round 4.
Yeah, round 4, because we just don't love the other picks either. The board isn't great, so we're like, oh, well, guard could be useful.
It could be. And Ben Cleveland is kind of like the perfect pick because he played center and he played guard, and he could be that swing guy. That's who I would look for. But I don't think they're ready to replace David DeCastro, so they're not going to look to. And at the same time, I think BJ Finney's got a year left, maybe a couple more if he plays super well. But I think JC Hassenauer is their new swing guard for the next, 4 or 5 years at least. Yeah, not that.
As long as he's not center, I don't care what he plays.
Yeah,
but it's funny too that like we always talked about, Marquise hanging him up with Ben, and now could very well be David DeCastro that goes out the same year that he goes out.
very well could be. And I think that will play a huge role next offseason, depending on, and especially if they play well. If the Steelers somehow go out, win a Super Bowl, David DeCastro's got nothing to come back for. Nothing at all.
If they go out and win a Super Bowl, just disregard the last 20 minutes or so of this show because none of it matters.
Disregard everything that I said, like from January to March, because I was the most negative Steelers fan.
I'm not counting them out. I think it's scary. Scary time,
I was the train conductor of the Ben should retire train.
Yeah.
But
I'm not counting them out. I just think that things need to fall very perfectly for them.
See,
listen,
I think
I've gotten I've gotten a lot more optimistic over the past month and a half or so. But it's just like initially, I think it's maybe just that terrible end to the season left a bitter taste in my mouth, and I was just like, okay, I don't care. Ben should just retire. If they're just going to be mediocre, you might as well just go all in on like planning for the future. But now that I've sweetened it up a little bit to this season.
I think that the biggest, I think the biggest thing that people are kind of overlooking, as much as they weren't overlooking at the beginning, is, Randy Fichtner was the reason the Steelers lost all those games. There's really nothing else. That was 100% the reason, and he's gone. So now we have no idea. Ben can come in here and throw for 300 yards a game and look like Ben Roethlisberger from week 1 through 7, for a whole season.
I would say Randy and offensive line. Mixture.
And the offensive line. Yeah. But both have been saved. And I think the offensive line has a much better season if Randy Fichtner if they're not throwing run pass options 4 times a game. If defenses don't know what's going on, I think the offensive line plays a lot better.
I think this isn't related to the draft at all, but they also need, their stars on defense to stop no-showing in the playoffs as well.
Very, very true. Very, very true.
But we will be back for the Penn show, obviously, this week. No mock draft Monday next week. Probably do one more Penn show, and then we will have our live draft show 1 week from Thursday for the draft. So what has this all been leading up to? It's leading up to draft night. And I'll show you this at least one more time, maybe a couple more times. Hands down, my favorite part about that is PK photoshopping Minka.
I was about to say, we didn't draft him. That was the first time that I've noticed that.
Oh, really?
That's in there. Yeah.
That was the first time you noticed that?
Yeah.
Anyway, Thursday, April 29th, night 1 of the draft. We will be here for a live show. We'll have some friends popping in and out. We're also going to have a ton of giveaways. One of our Twitter followers actually reached out to us and wanted to give away an autographed Joe Hayden jersey, so we'll be doing that along with all the other stuff that we got. I'm going to show you. Alex Highsmith signed 8x10. It's the transformation picture. Also, I don't know how great this is showing up, so it's better that you can just hear my voice talking about it. Also, is this upside down for you guys? No, that's good. Zach Banner signed 8x10. Cam Hayward home autographed jersey. By the way, huge shout out to Pristine Auctions. My favorite site.
That's where we've gotten a lot of giveaways from.
I mentioned trading a certain player, and I kind of hope that they don't for the person that's going to win this autographed James Washington jersey. Another autographed Cam Hayward jersey. This one's Color Rush. And finally, one of our favorite picks from the 2020 draft, autographed Kevin Dotson jersey. Nice. Great number. Other than that, do you guys got anything else?
No.
Nope.
Don't be upset when the Steelers don't draft a running back. That's all I have to say.
That's your advice to the fan base?
That's my advice to anybody.
Your parting thought.
If you're talking to us, we're not going to be upset.
No. I'm talking to everybody else. Just like the Ray McLeod thing.
All right. Well, I think that will do it. So for anybody that's not a Bucks and Pucks fan, we won't see you for the next episode. Hopefully you guys come back and tune in for the draft show if you're just here for the Steelers stuff. But whenever you do come back, we always appreciate you guys watching, listening, whatever it might be. And we will see you next time. Noah, can't thank you enough for coming on. It's always a pleasure. We appreciate all the work that you do. Obviously, everything you got going on. Keep up the great work.
Yes, sir.
I think that's about it. All right, boys. I'll talk to you later. Bye-bye.